It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis. I'm the host of the show. This is episode 92 with Amanda Wright. Great conversation. I'll talk more about what we talked about in a second without any spoilers. Spoiler alert, I'll talk about what we talked about in a second with no spoilers. If you are new here, because remember how I said, do you remember how I said just a second ago, remember how I said this is episode 92? That means there's 91 other episodes, okay? At verbalhighs.com. Breaking news. I just had the luxury, through the flexibility of parts of my employment week, to watch the entire 90-minute live stream of the first American presidential debate via the Herald website, actually. All I had to do was watch one ad at the beginning, get that 0.004 cents from 2 Degrees. I can remember the ad. Look at that. Bloody hell. That's bloody advertising money well spent. Anyway, I got that from 2 Degrees to the Herald, and then I had a stream to one of the most paywalled news outlets in New Zealand. Goodness. Here's what I took away, and I'm no pundit. No pundits, and nothing I'm going to say is particularly revelatory about the Trump presidency or the US in general at the moment. But what struck me was there were some rules set at the beginning that were basically like, don't talk over the other person during the 2-minute points on each of the 6 topics. Let them say their piece, and then you can have a bit of banter, bit of to and forth afterwards. And so there was that rule. That was completely ignored by Trump, and bizarrely and like unsettlingly so. So, you know, it's like, how can you win against someone? That's obviously a metaphor for the more broad Trump approach to things. How can you win against someone who just completely does not play the rules of the game, willfully and gleefully so? I know that they say, you know, they've always, politicians lie. We know that. Politicians have an element where they're in it for themselves. I mean, those two things are kind of the human condition amplified, aren't they? But yeah, it really struck home again what level that is at with Mr. Trump. He ignored the moderator to the point where it was like, you can imagine a sort of, I don't know, what's a good analogy, a boxing referee, like really trying to pull someone off someone else, and it just not happening, ears getting bitten off and so on. Toes, probably most distastefully for me, in the completely ignoring and dismantling the rules of the game, were the ad hominem attacks. Like, I know in a heated debate, someone like Winston Peters is very good at this, can do it quite humorously, whatever you think of him, kind of having that wee jab at the person, but it was pretty ugly. Trump in Biden's direction. By the way, for the record, throughout all of this, if it's not already a given with the way I'm framing this, Biden observed all these rules, so it was sort of an uneven ting to begin with. But when the ad hominem attacks moved to Biden's sons, that was particularly gross. If I had strong feels during that whole thing, it was during then. I was like, man, it's just, where are we? Where are we, people?
What kind of fuckery is this?
The one where I really got particularly gross was where he called out another son for being a drug addict. The implication was like he was a loser and so on, and that was provoked a pretty raw response from Biden, I thought. Obviously, in the quite measured circumstances needed for that thing. Yes, and the other thing was, like I say, systematically dismantles the rules of the game. Like I chose that word very purposely because I sort of thought Trump was a bit of a dunce for a period there, but I'm now more subscribing to that theory that is very much manufactured for audiences and rallies. I'm not saying in the same breath that you could sit down and debate the finer points of Nietzsche with him, but he certainly had some impressive talking points. I don't mean the content of them, but the way he can orate when he needs to was a level up from that kind of Gumby thing he does in more kind of local speeches and rallies and so on. So it also terrifyingly reinforced the discussion about the kind of nefarious activities he's up to in the background based on that manufactured above-the-line presence being very, very much intended. But I still think he's not the brightest candle in some ways. Anyway. Hey, well, look, he's running America, so what would I know? Then at the end, this is really interesting, the audience also had rules. It was basically like STFU, so they could clap at the beginning, they could clap at the end. The two wives got up, it was very civil, they clapped for each couple, and then right just before the live feed cut out, there were two yells from the audience. One of them was greatest president ever, the second one was we love you Trump. But I swear to God, I'm not even like hamming this up for the mic. They both sounded like this. I'll do the we love you Trump. We love you Trump. It was menacing. It was menacing, and it kind of made me think about that. Kind of feels like how maybe a lot of public spaces feel in the States at the moment. I don't know, but with all the unrest there. I was going to talk about a couple of other things today, but I'll leave it there because it's turning into a very long introduction. We talk about a whole lot of stuff, Amanda and I, anxiety, planet stuff. That sounds a bit heavy. Oh God, radical uncertainty. I started off there. Adoption, fascinating, nature versus nurture, Goa trance, Goa in general. We had a lively debate about the history of the fax machine. Oh, it just didn't stop. Of course, a lot of conversation about Explore. I've always been fascinated about that event, and about event and planning and kind of deployment and all of that in general. Some nice kind of like behind the scenes stuff. And we talked about a particular Explore where Erykah Badu was a bit of a dick, and then there were poos in the water on the Sunday, which isn't the best when you're organising something like that, is it? Like the show on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, that Apple thing. There's also Google Podcasts. There's also all your podcast apps. It goes out on RSS, so it should be everywhere. Koha for this episode. I don't even want 0.0004 cents from you. I just want you to share it and maybe give it a like somewhere, or leave feedback on something. It's a passion project. Enjoy.
What kind of fuckery are you?
This is Dr. Janet's Verbal Highs.
Yeah, it's been a challenging, tumultuous year. I guess I've been in an interesting position where I had a central government contract that's been, but I've been able to ride that right through. So, I've been one of the fortunate ones that have had, employment and money and...
Yeah, I'm the same.
Not on the edge of, Do you want
to get in a little bit closer to the microphone here?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I'm the same. You've got to count your blessings, right, eh?
Totally. Yeah.
I just realised I started with quite a gigantic question for someone I've not met before. Are you... Because the last guest I talked to, kind of anxiety and stuff came up, and I think even people who aren't prone to it, now's the kind of time. Like, have you had your moments of anxiousness, or are you quite sort of...
I mean, anxiousness from a personal perspective,
yeah,
to a certain degree. I think more a bit of despair around the planet, really.
That's kind of what I was,
But, I mean, I've been having a bit of despair around the planet for a while, really, on the whole sort of climate change, extinction of species, on an environmental level, stuff that really overwhelms me.
Yeah, it does to me as well.
And I feel quite a bit of despair more around the planet as a whole versus me as an individual. Although I definitely have had my moments of me as an individual. I think it's been an interesting time since I left Explore, and I've really been trying to sort of, find my way and find my space and during this whole COVID time, for the last 2 years, I've been working on a new project. I mean, this stuff will probably all come up as we go along, but I've been working on a new project that was meant to be launched next summer.
Is that Cuba Duper?
No. I worked on Cuba Duper as the festival manager, and just for one session. I mean, I worked on Cuba Duper that 1.5 years ago that had to completely go from being a street festival to be taken inside after the Christchurch attacks. So,
that's right.
So, you know,
God, it's more sort of radical uncertainty steps into your
it's
realm.
been a really interesting.
And that's
I mean, you know, just from a country perspective as well. You know, what we've dealt with in the last. You know, I think the Christchurch attacks was the thing that actually freaked me out more than anything. I just, you know, because it was not something that you had never experienced in your lifetime here in this country,
no.
and when and that really threw me, completely. And then also been one of the team that had to sort of either cancel the event or keep it going, and then how you reprogram an entire street festival in 5 days, and try and convince everyone that it's a good thing to be doing.
And it's that sort of, I so hear that, it's that sort of like really unknown learning curve where in retrospect you might say the right decisions were made, the wrong decisions are made, you just need to make decisions quickly. And this, funnily enough, ties in with you talking about the immediacy of climate change, and just, we're going quite deep quite quickly here, but a lot of these things, it strikes me as we're getting to this point where these quick decisions are having to be made about things a lot of the time, which is no way. Yeah,
unfortunately, they're just not quick.
No,
they're not quick enough. And I mean, I think the most fascinating thing for me with COVID has been the decisions that were made so quickly by our government. You know, and I really support what they've done and mostly how they've done it. But the reality is that overnight, our country had to obey,
which is very different to the Kiwi ethos we know, and we I get it.
Right, mate. So, but for me, it was how quickly decisions could be made, versus how long things drag out, and that is.
What are you meaning there?
Well, decisions on environmental issues, or so I'm talking about how quickly something got decided on a pandemic.
Why can't we do it with A, B, C, and D?
Why can't we not make those quick decisions with other things that are actually more important? I mean, you know, I think you can talk about climate change, the degradation of our environment, we as a human species, what's going on, and know that it's actually all connected. You know, COVID has come from, well, we don't know the exact cause, but, you know, if it did come through something like an animal that passed on that virus, it's the only reason that it passed that virus on is because we created the environment and the circumstances for that to happen. Yeah. You know, so... Yeah,
I do know exactly what you're saying.
You know, it's like...
It's circular.
Everything is connected, and everything is happening for a reason. And so I think... For me, it was like, wow, if the government and the world can respond so quickly to this pandemic, why are we not responding so quickly to the destruction of our planet?
I guess the answer is, and it's not ideal, but the answer would maybe be that when you see the kind of revolt that's starting to happen with certain fringe elements who spend too long on the wrong parts of the internet, it comes back to that, our response to really quick decisions being made, and that it's such a catch-22 with humanity. It's like this, totally. We don't want this authoritarian kind of, you're doing this now. Yes. But I hear you. In some instances, you feel like it kind of needs to be done. It's big. Yeah. It's big. Let's go back a little. Where are you from originally? So I know that you kind of found a kind of path you've been on, broadly via travelling, I think, throughout the 90s. But where are you from in New Zealand? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Waikato, and I grew up on a dairy farm between Matamata and Tirau. Yeah.
There's a song in that.
Oh, there is. There's a story I can tell you. Yeah. I grew up on I was the youngest of 5 siblings,
Yeah.
and I had a pretty awesome life growing up on the farm. But I also grew up in quite an interesting sort of farming environment. I guess that's been quite integral as to who and why I am the way I am today, in these days as well. But I was adopted, but the family I was adopted into, my father was a dairy farmer, but quite a progressive dairy farmer, and actually he was I'm not going to say he was a green dairy farm, as in his practices were green, but actually he was one of the key people in the 70s that was responsible for getting a lot of our forests, our native forests saved.
I was going to say, for the time, he was green and progressive.
He was very green and progressive and quite liberal thinking in that side of things. He understood that when native forests got cut down, that the runoff and the sediment and the degradation of the soils and the outcomes of what went on with that was huge. So I had this interesting upbringing where, we were a reasonably conservative family in many ways, in some thinking, but then in others that was quite liberal.
So it sounds to me like you got I kind of like that. It's quite a good grounding to begin with in a lot of ways, because the whole everyone seems to be polarised one way or the other at the moment. You've got a grounding and can I ask, because it's another sort of hot button topic these days, were his contemporaries, were other farmers, did they they thought he was full of?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that I don't know what other farmers thought of Dad on his conservation side of things. Possibly a lot of them didn't even really know about it, because Dad then, he was part of what was back in those days called Native Forest Action Council. Yeah. And there were not a lot of other farmers in that sector. So, I think he probably kept it reasonably quiet. He wasn't out there, because it wasn't so much around farming practices. It was more around the forestry and the logging practices that he was dead against. Although he was also very progressive in his farming practice and approaches, in the sense that he was, pioneering, as I would say, what he did. He was, one of the first farmers that got a rotary cowshed, and also things like wintering barns, which is very unusual, particularly back in that time. So big barns where if the weather was really bad in the winter, they would put them in there overnight, and they'd get fed hay, and then they'd go, so it didn't destroy the pasture, for example. It was more around that versus, locking the cows out to,
And has a number of that stuff followed through? Oh my gosh, man, my blooming phone. This has happened twice in a row now, 2 episodes, sorry about that. And so some of those practices followed through to today?
Yeah, well, my dad remained a farmer for a very long time. Yeah. He's now 94.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Still on the family land?
No,
too hard.
Sadly, they left the land not that long ago after they subdivided 10 acres and grew olives for a while.
So he kept it working all that time?
He kept it working all that time. And then, sadly, my sister passed away 7 years ago. Yeah. And that really destroyed them, as it would with any parent losing one of their children to cancer. And they just decided they needed to move to Hamilton, where close to family, and they needed to leave the farm. It was just getting too hard. And that was hugely tough. He'd been on that land since he was born. And
I can feel that in you telling that story, right?
It was really sad, actually. And it was very sad to leave that land.
And go to the city.
Yeah, go to the city. Well, they're actually just on the outskirts of Hamilton on a 1 acre block.
Oh, great. So there's still a bit of land there.
Yeah.
And then so from there, this is like one of those graphics at a documentary of a plane going.
Yeah.
How do you end up discovering the scene in Goa in 1990?
Yeah. I mean,
what I mean there is, before you answer that, is I assume you didn't. It's very early times for kind of the dance music, outdoor music scene in general. Sure. I'm assuming you didn't go there knowing it was there. You found it there.
I did know a little bit about it before I went there. I mean, I left school and halfway through my 7th form year, and I moved to Tauranga and studied horticulture for a year, and then in mid-1985 I moved to Auckland.
Yeah.
And I stayed in Auckland for the 5 years basically, and I was really into the music scene back in the whole indie band music scene. And I loved a good party. That was always part of my heart and soul.
Good.
And I went between all sorts of different jobs, working for a River Rats rafting company. Then I ended up working for Telecom. I did all sorts of things. I had no set
Where are we here?
career
Like late
path.
teens, early 20s?
Yeah, so I moved up here when I was 18, and so I pretty much stayed here. 18 till I left on my 23rd birthday. I left New Zealand and went travelling, and in that time I'd had a flatmate that had come back and had been to Goa, and she'd said how great it was, and then I headed off to Indonesia and went travelling through Asia, and as I went I met people that were all from that sort of, had done a lot of travel in India, also Kopangang in Thailand, and what was the other island? Kopangang and Koh Samui, which were the big party islands where a lot of the outdoor, the first sort of dance.
Underground music, or
I mean, of course, it was underground back then. I mean, it was. Everyone thinks back to when they think about Goa, they think about psytrance. Well, I mean, the early days in the 90s, there was no psytrance.
That's what I was going to ask. What was getting? This is the music nerd in me. What sort of thing was getting played?
It was kind of a lot of electro-y sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Beats, 100% electronic, and I guess that's the roots of early day trance music. In fact, I was looking at some videos the other day, and the other interesting thing about
it's weird watching videos of stuff.
Well, back from that, but I watched it and I go, oh, no wonder I fell in love with that place. I mean, it was, I guess where the word trance music came from. When I look at how we were really in trance, yes, of course, there was drug use and everything that contributed to that sort of psychedelic space. Being in nature, being with tribe, there were so many different nationalities there.
That's what I wanted to ask. There was two things. We've got two prongs here. I mean, genre is something that happens after a thing often, right? So I can tell you what I would recognise as a Goa trance record, a few years later. Yeah. But the other thing I was going to say is, back then what also interested me, because you obviously ended up being a lot on the organisational side of putting things together, and I nerd out on this stuff as well. I know in future years was a big kind of Israeli scene, right? So what I'm asking about is, who kind of made this all happen in Goa initially? Was it the locals or some sort of like... Yeah, well,
that's a really valid question. It was a combination of the locals with the internationals. Local Goan people. So I guess the interesting thing about Goa was it was...
Pre-internet, pre-anyone connecting globally, it's fascinating.
Well, I just want to say when I first went to Goa, that was pre-fax machine.
Yeah, it wasn't pre-fax machine. Fax machines were around in the 80s. Give yourself some credit.
Well, I mean, I didn't find out about them until a bit later. But I mean, when I went travelling,
that is the quote of the episode.
Yeah, I don't know.
A party pre-fax machine.
No, honestly. But I mean, here's the hilarious thing. Back then, I mean, when I was travelling, so 1990 was the big year. I left in mid-1990. By November 1990, I was in Goa, and I didn't leave for 6 months. But when I first went travelling, you only got messages via the post restante, and you there wasn't the fax machine. Well, there certainly wasn't the fax machine in Goa at that point. That came a year or two later, etc. But anyhow, so who put on the parties? So, I mean, obviously, the extraordinary thing about Goa was the multi-nationalities that came in there. And it was quite interesting, being a Kiwi amongst quite strong cliques of different nationalities. So you mentioned the Israelis.
Well, it just became a sort of a trope, didn't it? You finish your compulsory military training,
it was
the more alternative ones end up there.
It was rite of passage for a lot of them. And also then you had your your Germans, you had your French, you had the Italians, you had the English, you had but I mean a lot of mixing and crossing over, but there was some quite strong cliques and niches of different groups of people in there. That was fascinating.
Yeah, sure.
And so being a Kiwi was wonderful because you could sort of just flow in between, and you weren't.
Must have been very eye-opening compared to rural New Zealand.
Well, Auckland City, it was quite eye-opening compared to Auckland City. It was eye-opening in so many ways. I remember the first party I went to, the first proper party where everything was sort of, painted up, and the sound systems and the people all sort of dressed up. But I mean, it wasn't really a costume thing, but there was lots of, I don't know, fluoro and
I get it.
tights and everything that sort of happened back at that time,
Yeah.
which now actually it's just done a full cycle, and that's exactly what happens out there now a lot of the time at parties.
Oh, really? It's going back to that. Yeah, right.
Well,
the kind of, for me, it would be like on-train era for me, that kind of...
Yeah. No, well, that's right. But, you just have to look at things like, well, whether it's OM or Splore or whatever, there's a lot of people out there in their psychedelic clothes.
Why not?
Yeah. Anyhow. Whatever.
There's
There's
other reasons that I can't think of the word. Things come and go.
Yeah, of course. But I'll never forget that first one. It was just like could never have imagined anything quite like it in my wildest dreams. And I went, this is it. I don't need to go anywhere else. If this is what it was incredible. The music, the dancing, the vibe, the energy was extraordinary. So I consequently ended up staying there about 6 months, and the parties were put on by locals or different. So there were DJs.
Yeah. And
back in the day, now this will be the quote of the day.
You can't beat
if you
the
think
fax
about
machine. Sorry, don't try and beat it.
No. How do you think they used to mix music back in that time?
Oh, this is where when I was doing what we talked about in my reading beforehand, I can actually answer that. Is the answer DAT tapes?
Pre-DAT tapes.
Oh, okay.
That's how I began with DAT tapes, right? No.
So what I read is there was lots of dirt and there's lots of dust around.
Yes.
So if it wasn't records, not cassette tapes.
Recordable Walkman, cassette Walkmans.
Oh, 2 Walkmans going through a huge...
Two Walkmans. But Sony actually produced a beautiful recordable Walkman back in the late 80s, early 90s. And then following from that was the DAT machine.
Yeah.
So, and that's how the parties happened, was mixing 2 recordable cassette machines.
And so someone recorded, I assume, this is actually a dumb question, they would just recorded the music off vinyl or whatever it was to get it out there. Great.
Exactly.
And, so as an aside, let's base your experience on the entire globe now. I feel like, like someone your age when you did that these days, do you think as many people are doing that? Sort of free abandoned travel these days?
No.
The world's changed, right?
Well, the world has definitely changed. Oh my God! Of course, it's changed. I mean, the world changes every day. I think back. This is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm 53 now, and at that age, it was our rite of passage to go on our OE.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if OEs happen on the same level as what they used to back then.
I think they're going to London for 2 years and coming back still happens, or England or whatever. It's a curious one.
Yeah.
I've just been looking at my younger cousin who's 18 or 19 and feeling a bit, I don't know, a bit sort of like down for where his generation's at, because he's kind of stuck on inside wondering where this year's going to end up,
Well, I mean, I had lots of friends, kids that were heading off overseas on their travels, know, and were booked in to go to festivals all through Europe, and they can't do it. So is the world travelling in the same sort of way? Well, it's actually easier to travel.
True.
Right?
Yep.
It's less expensive to travel.
True.
There is so many more opportunities and places you can go nowadays. So whether there are...
Would you just get work place to place? I didn't even think about that till you said it. You just get a bit of work each place you're travelling through before you started DJing, like to move from one spot to the next? Yeah,
so I ended up with a German boyfriend living in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And...
Wow, that's very global.
Yeah.
Very close. I didn't mean the boyfriend. I mean
so I spent 2 summers in Amsterdam, and did quite a bit of work. Actually, that's when I sort of started working. I mean, I was following. So basically, what happened with Goa is you'd have all the everyone come to Goa for the season. So the season was from sort of November to April, and then after that, everyone would return to Europe or their chosen homes, and then the festival scene, the outdoor festival scene, or as the case may have been in London, the warehouse rave scene or whatever. Would then take place. So there were plenty of parties going on outdoors, particularly in Germany, Austria and Switzerland and Holland.
Because the warehouse thing, I mean, clubs even one step removed from that, never really appealed to you from what I could deduce, right? You like being outdoors is a big part of the
I definitely love the outdoor side of things. I went, that was just because that's what... It's gone.
Oh, have your headphones gone?
Yeah.
I can still hear you.
There we
here.
go. Okay, now something happened.
Expensive device, that.
I was definitely attracted to the outdoor scene much more.
Yeah.
That's where I felt my sense of freedom and comfort, and that's where I fell in love with it. So that's kind of where I wanted to stay.
And then there's another step in any kind of group or circles or scene or whatever you want to call it, to kind of like actually be able to step up and kind of play music and stuff. Did you... how did you get involved with that? Because if it's cassette tapes and stuff, I'm thinking it's not as easy as walking into a record shop and buying the tunes. Or
so I guess there was lots of swapping and exchanging of music.
That's great.
So lots of recording from each other.
That's the opposite ethos of a lot of other scenes.
But I actually got into it. I mean, I guess there was one person that really inspired me. He was a Kiwi guy called Ray Castles, and he was one of the sort of well-known DJs in Goa. So I sort of connected with him. I just knew various people that I was inspired by with their music they were playing, and I thought, I'd quite like to give that a crack. And then I can't even remember how it first happened. Anyhow, I bought a DAT machine because DAT machines suddenly became the new thing.
Makes sense.
And started to record music and swap music. So I started swapping and exchanging music in Goa, and then when I was back in Europe. So I went between Goa and Europe basically for 7 years.
So you don't strike me as somebody who kind of measure yourself based on this statement, but it occurs to me you're one of New Zealand's first kind of international touring DJs, aren't you?
Oh, God. I mean, I guess I did end up with an agent that booked me from Germany.
Amazing.
And that was incredible. And so, that's how I also survived. And
great.
Apart from
fantastic.
Also while I was over there, so one of my best friends here in New Zealand started making a really cool range of clothes called Natty Tat. And so I was selling her clothes, which were perfect for sort of festival party wear sometimes at the festivals, but actually I would just get a shipment of clothes in from New Zealand, and my Swiss or Dutch friends would all sort of be lined up waiting to, as I pulled it out of the boxes, to buy it. So I was also spreading the love about, New Zealand products and, the brand and people. Yeah. It was quite interesting being a New Zealand woman in those places because it's one of the few places that I actually felt quite exotic. No, it's true. I'm laughing with you. Because if you go to England, you're just a Kiwi. But in Europe, and I think they were also quite fascinated by this sort of strong, independent, free woman that was just doing her thing. Yeah. Not that I was, I'm just saying it was fascinating.
No, what you're saying makes absolutely perfect sense.
And I was fearless. I had no fear. I was very confident. I was very able to just move amongst the different groups and the different people.
I think I asked the people who've got involved in quite esoteric endeavours, did your parents get it? Like what you? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
My parents didn't.
And that goes a number of ways. It's like we don't get it, we're concerned. We don't get it, but hey, have a good time.
My parents were most concerned,
right?
Particularly my adoptive parents. Whereas prior to me leaving, I had found both my birth parents.
I wasn't going to ask you about that.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
Because that's actually, when I said there's a good story. Yeah. That's another story. But when I was 19, I met my birth mother, and when I was 21, I met my birth father. My birth father now lives in Denmark, but I met him here in New Zealand, and so that's been but both my birth parents got it because my dad had also been a traveller.
So there's you got some serious nature versus nurture contemplations going on there for your life, right?
There has been a massive amount of that, and it's really clear that, interesting enough, the nature versus nurture.
I've got it not through being adopted,
Yeah.
but through having a parent who is fairly dysfunctional, but who I've had enough glimpses of in my life to realise that some stuff I just wasn't taught. It's in my DNA.
Right.
Do you kind of get what I mean?
Yep.
I have one person who's come in and out.
Yep.
It is fascinating
Yep.
stuff. I think it's totally a mixture of both.
I mean,
know?
it's I think my ideology and has definitely come from my family that I grew up with. Interesting enough, very similar in lots of ways to my birth parents. But you meet your birth parents for the first time, and you hang out with them for a little bit, and you've got these habits that are identical.
Oh my gosh.
And you've never actually spent a minute of your life with them, and the next minute,
the mannerisms,
it might be
and so
the
on.
way you scratch your nose, or the way you laugh, or the
Yeah.
way you I don't know, but it's and more as I get older, I go, oh my God, I'm so much like my birth parents. And then suddenly I hear I'll say something.
So you've maintained that relationship with them?
I have a relationship with
and
them.
was it, were you, I mean, I guess it comes with being adopted, right? Your adopted parents, did they...
They were very supportive of me, always.
So interesting, yeah.
Or very supportive of me finding my birth parents. And
did they even... So just to cap this off with the first question where we started with that, which is like, what did your folks think of it, by which I mean your adopted folks? Where was the penny drop? I'd imagine if it wasn't early, it would have been coming to explore and going, oh, okay. Like, did they...
When did my parents finally recognise?
Well, did they? Yeah, did they?
No, I'll tell you when I made it.
This is a demon I'm tapping into of mine that I need to hear someone else's.
No, that's so brilliant. I'll tell you one of the best things. I was having a giggle with my brother the other day about.
I want to be understood.
Yeah, no. Guess when my parents finally went, God, she's made it in life.
Okay.
We get her now.
Yeah.
Is when Kim Hill interviewed me.
Oh, beautiful.
They were like, our daughter's been interviewed by Kim Hill, and she actually managed Kim Hill. It's such a moment. It was like,
excellent.
So that was actually definitely a penny drop moment.
I play a thing to my students, Tom Scott from Homebrew, when he pretends to be his mum as part of the interview. That sort of sounds similar. He's like, and he goes, I'm not going to do it right, but it's like him pretending to be his mum going, he's on Kim Hill, and he's going, you're with the most famous journalist in New Zealand. I'm really proud of you. But it's sweet. It's lovely, man.
I mean, and I think that's the beauty of life is that at some point it's maternal and paternal concern for the best reasons. Of course, and sometimes they just don't understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
No, totally.
And while my adoptive parents never came to Sploor, both my birth parents have come to Sploor, and I've had nephews and nieces. I mean, they get it, but but
because what you're describing back then is so far out compared to New Zealand at the time. I get it,
Yeah, no.
And so you come on back here, and this is, again, doing a little bit of reading, you discovered kindred spirits, but was there a bit of, what's the word, not anticipation, I can't think of the word, a bit of trepidation on the plane as to what New Zealand would be like coming back, or were you ready to come home?
Interesting enough, was ready to come home.
Yeah.
I had, in the 7 years that I've been away...
Culture shock.
I'd popped back a couple of times and I'd started to see things progress. And things like cyberculture had opened up when Mike Weston was running cyberculture.
Yeah, I've had him on this.
And his partner, Isolde at the time, had a fashion label called Seed. And actually I popped down to see these guys. And Heath Bourgeon, who runs, Heath, he's now got...
Do I? I know Heath when he was at Cyberculture because I was from Wellington and I bought a record or two when I came up.
Retro, the antique shop on K Road.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. Anyhow, Heath. So I remember popping down there. I think it was back in '94. I popped down to see Mike, and he goes, "Oh, you're doing a bit of DJing." He goes, "Oh, Verona's got a party on tonight," and he said, "You should go and ask them if you want to DJ."
Good old Verona.
And off I popped, and I went and introduced myself to Hillary and said, "Hi, I'm da-da-da, and I'm a DJ. Do you want me to play tonight?" She's like, why not?
Great.
And I got to have a little DJ gig there. Of course, a lot of them had not had that sort of music that I was playing, which was
Even K Road was a bit more wild then.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no?
And so I'd come back and I'd had a little taste of how things were progressing in New Zealand, because it was a bit bland when I left.
We've gone full circle. I don't want to go there.
God,
We
it has
live.
gone
The
full
world is a safe land. Anyway.
Yeah. So came back and was ready to come back. I think also what happened for me in Goa in 1997 is I'd actually had enough. I started to see things really changing. I started to see things changing in
Were you
India.
starting to burn out a little just from all the travel? And
No, I was just more disappointed with.
I heard about what happened with Goa. It's like a lot of scenes. It gets taken over a little.
Yeah, it got taken over, but not
Bit
just
more
Goa.
litter.
It was also what was happening with India,
Yeah.
and I don't know. There was just I was just starting to feel uncomfortable there. I felt more uncomfortable there 7 years later than I had when I first went
Is
there
this,
in
is this
1990.
something along the lines of it starting to turn into sort of like the well-worn kind of Bali tourist trail, that sort of vibe? Or?
There was a little bit of that, but what
Yeah.
was happening is that the Western world was having a much bigger influence. It was Reagan times, the war
Yeah,
on drugs
yeah.
was happening. There was, a USSR had broken down, a lot of Russian travellers coming for the first time they'd ever
Extraordinary.
left. And not just coming to travel, but absolutely having any sort of respect for the culture. You know, women walking around in miniskirts, and, you know, not covering their shoulders, or, you know, outside of Goa I'm talking about, in the Hindu and Muslim places where there was very little respect for the culture that was going on. So we started to be perceived as trashy.
You're lumped
Western
in. Yeah.
women were starting to be...
So you start to, by proxy,
Yep.
get a different attitude
Yep,
and vibe
absolutely.
from
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's
So came home and was ready to give it a crack back here.
Yeah.
And, you know, was keen to continue my DJing, was keen to look at doing some parties or festivals. And in 1998, I started a company called Mycelium,
yeah.
which was kind of like a talent agency set
Yeah.
up to promote DJs, VJs, street performers, and certain brands of New Zealand clothes, which was Natty Tat, and also Love, which was Paul Sweetman's brand back
Yes,
in the day.
yeah, I had one of those bags.
Yeah. He's just redoing them,
Right.
bringing them back to life in
Yeah.
a different form so that they can handle telephones.
The
even
only
better.
man bag I'd consider wearing, the little tiny ones, were quite cool.
Yeah, no,
very,
they were-
very of the rave era.
Yeah, they were. So anyhow, there
Yeah.
you go. So I started this agency, which was really to promote all these people. But during that time, also myself and Jamie and Anne Larnock, and various people were starting to do these small underground outdoor parties, completely renegade.
Yeah.
But we were really keen to sort of build and grow on that. And then what happened with Mycelium is it did continue to grow, but we kind of used Mycelium as the production company that ended up being a production company that launched Splore.
Yeah.
But the first Splore,
Yeah.
I got invited to go to America to DJ at the launch of a record label called Blue Room
Yeah.
in San Francisco.
Yeah. Good
And
era for San Fran.
Very good
Yeah.
era
Yeah.
for San Fran.
Totally.
And they took me out to Burning Man. And that was my next tipping point of tribe community.
Did you,
and
by any chance, meet any of that sort of? There was a sort of weird crossover. There was a hippie house scene over there at the time, like Dub Tribe Sound System and
Yep,
all of that.
Yep,
I really liked those records for a minute.
No,
yeah.
absolutely. No. So there was.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting time, and that was. For me, it was like, well, I finished with Goa, but here's my next thing,
Yeah.
which was completely different from Goa,
Yeah.
and also in a very different environment. But also, it had elements of the stuff that I loved about Goa, but it was on another plane and a different level. And
In San Fran.
in San Fran
Yeah.
and Burning Man,
Yes, of course.
out in Nevada desert, and it was actually the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever seen.
Burning Man's such a mystery to me, and like I've been around, but it's sort of like, yeah, it's
Well, that's changed, like so many things.
Yeah.
And when I went,
there's been
and-
some unfortunate things happen in the last few years as
yeah,
well.
there has. And
But anyway, let's concentrate on-
No, but what I wanted to say about
Yeah.
that is that Burning Man ended up being my. It was my calling each year. I went back to Burning Man each
That's
year
what people
for 4,
do. People
for
are really
4 years
yeah.
in a row.
That's what's fascinating about it.
And I was probably one of the first Kiwis, and definitely out there. That was apart from a couple of others that went out at that time, and that's really influenced how we built and developed Splore
Great.
up over that time.
Just as a quick aside, so did you have anything to do with Kiwi Burn, or is that
I've only been to one Kiwi Burn,
Yeah.
so I'm not a Kiwi. I'm not the right person to ask about Kiwi Burn.
right? But it was that's.
But
kind of
Kiwi Burn
an
was
offshoot.
born from
Yeah.
Burning Man, absolutely. And they do these regional burns around the world, and Kiwi Burn is one of them.
So around this time, totally preaching to the choir here. This is for listeners. The in train, on train, whatever's turned into the gathering. It's at that point of the gathering, in my opinion, that sort of the halcyon days of it before it went off the hill and got a bit fugly. But you guys are doing something in Auckland, but you're kind of like far enough away, and there's enough people up here to do something while that's popping off down there. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the gathering story, and I'm probably not the best person to tell the story, but I can tell you that the gathering was, in so many words, was kind of hijacked from N-Train.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anyhow, that's in the past now.
Yeah.
But so one of those people that were the core N-Train people was Jamie Larnock.
Got you.
So we came together to do Splore.
I get what you're saying. Yep.
We wanted to do Splore because we wanted to do something that was closer to home and also represented our Auckland scene, and the fact that there was a whole group of us that were. I mean, that's also the same time that Normanby Road was all starting.
Yeah.
So there was
I'm not an Aucklander, but I know of all of this. I lived up here in '99.
Yeah, right. So that was Normanby Road time, and all these things were starting to happen. So I guess we just
That Micronism album's amazing.
Oh God,
That's an amazing. That's just a Kiwi. That's in general. That is an extraordinary New Zealand
absolutely,
album.
yeah, totally amazing.
Yeah. Just thought I'd put that in there.
Yeah, no, it
just made me think of that time and era.
So yes, you're right. When we started Splore, I would say the gathering was peaking.
Yeah.
Or, it really was coming to that time where the pilgrimages of people from around the country went to the gathering, and we weren't trying to compete with the gathering.
No.
It wasn't about.
You just wanted to do something up here.
We just wanted to do something up here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the first Splore, I think we had 600 people or something, 700 people come.
99 or 98 or something.
New Year's Eve, 1998-99
Yep.
was the first Splore, and it was over 3 days in the dusty hilltops.
Friends and whānau, like you just word of mouth.
Friends and mouth. We did a little bit of advertising, and we had people
just
there.
koha for the sound system and stuff.
We sold
tickets.
We sold tickets.
Great.
I think they were about $40 or something, and some key people came to the first Splore, which ended up being. Morgan Sibbald was one of them, and he ended up being he approached me after the first Splore saying, I think you've really got something. I'd really like to work with you on the next one, because we just thought it was going to be a one-off. That was it, that was fun.
That was fun. Pack it all down. So fucking tiring.
Yeah, no, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But anyhow, Morgan Sibbald approached, and we ended up doing and Morgan also he was young.
Yeah.
He was probably 19 or 20 when he approached me, and he also had but he was really connected to
I don't know who that is.
So Morgan Sibbald.
You said it like a
no, well, I don't know. I don't know. Have you heard? He was he's
still in New Zealand?
No, he's very international, Morgan, nowadays.
Right.
Morgan was a young entrepreneur.
This could be what I look up afterwards, yeah.
Zoe and Morgan, have you heard of a jewellery label here in international? It's Zoe and Morgan.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So his
one of those guys,
just one of those guys, and families was very entrepreneurial and very connected.
Yeah.
So Morgan came on board, and we did the next Splore together. He was also connected to the house scene, the drum bass scene, and he brought in some, not that the first Splore was all about trance by any means. We had house music, we had drum and bass, but actually Morgan had a bit of
I like that, and that's
people.
quite a New Zealand thing, or at least it was back then. It really is. I miss that at nights in the city like it used to be, just one DJ play this, play that. This is just reminiscent stuff anyway.
But you're absolutely right, Lewis. And there was there wasn't so much clicky, nichey stuff back then.
You're such an engaging raconteur that I'm actually going to get to my first actual written question here. I'm serious. Because what is a good point here? So, Splore, like you said, it's inspired by Burning Man and the trance scene, and I know that you've spoken about this when John came on board in 2004, but in that kind of 5-year period and moving into that stage, you know, the trance scene's underground even in a dance music
Yeah.
sense, to me, at
Yeah.
least. What was the balancing act like, or the kind of movement through, you know, ending up wanting to make it a more commercially viable operation, as you kind of said, from 2004 onwards? Was it is it a tough thing to reconcile? And I'm thinking, you know, keeping that balance, and you probably thought about it all the way through to your left, right? Keeping the roots while.
Well, I'm going to be perfectly
Was
honest.
that a lot of wobbly, bobbly, jobbly nonsense, or did that make sense? It's a question.
Okay, so there's quite a few questions in there.
Yeah, it's a Lewis question.
So first of all, when I came back from overseas, I was also, my music styles were already starting to change. At that time, things were going into what they called breaks trance,
Yeah.
which was a lot more breaky sounds.
Yeah.
I think by a year later, I was playing drum and bass.
Yeah.
And breaks, and
Yeah.
so I
Just got to play what moves you.
and I loved the fact that there was so much diversity here in New Zealand and openness to different sorts of genres of music. So, you know, I think the first 5 explores we actually got rid of trance, much to the disgust.
The chagrin, I love that
The
word.
disgust of the trance scene. Could
Yeah.
not believe that we pretty much ousted it. And
Yeah.
but that was maybe by the third one.
Yeah.
So, you know, even at the second one, we had Dallas and Moo playing,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah,
know,
I get it.
and
You wanted good music for outdoors.
we had all sorts of great music. We had house DJs playing. We had drum and bass. We had all sorts of DJs playing. And so I think, you know, and we did 3 at Kariatahi before we moved to Waharau, which is where, you know, 2002, Explore 2002 was probably my most favourite Explore and the biggest tipping point for Explore, where we moved sites and really started to add the content. We had a lot more live music. That's when Fat Freddy's first played in the Geodesic Dome, where they filmed the Hope video.
Now,
That was probably the most
I
extraordinary.
find any event, especially large scale, extraordinary. That fascinates me, like what people achieve putting them together. So I was just thinking there, I'm going to ask you a bit more about this later, about what I spoke to there. But I'd imagine that, once you start introducing live bands and stuff, the level of kind of production and things you need to do changes as well.
Huge,
There's a whole
huge,
Yeah.
and level of production.
Not just cassette Walkmans now.
We've moved a little bit beyond that by then.
No, it's still a huge thing to set up. But
and you know, of course, having that Explore 2002 was insane. We imported a geodesic dome and a whole troop from Burning Man. We put a sound system into a round space, and thank God we had a really good French sound engineer that could spiral the sound. We had Fat Freddy's in the middle, and the crowd around them like this. It was extraordinary.
And it's in the Hope video, like you say, the footage in that.
That's exactly when that happened. And I'll never forget that moment when that was happening.
Wow.
It was electric. There was literally there were sparks. I mean, you know, being the festival producer, you are completely straight, always and always.
Yeah.
But the magic, and I
Endorphins.
don't mean this to sound like a dippy, trippy hippie here, but because I'm not one anymore.
Anymore.
But it was electric and magic, and
great.
nothing like that had been experienced before. It wasn't just them. Then we had Tom Bailey and Holy Water producing, so classical Indian musicians playing with Tom Bailey and Isaac Tucker and James Pinker. We had so much amazing new content that had never been experienced or seen before at that festival, and it was the beginning of Explore really starting to blossom and grow. Now at that time we were, you know, trying to make it, and we were just breaking even and trotting along, but it was in 2004 when we actually lost quite a bit of money, that things actually went, okay, the commercial reality is we have not been doing this very well. And
I'd imagine that, as I say, the fatigue of putting it all on, that's just not a great ending to another round.
It's not. Our biggest lessons were doing things like giving away far too many complimentary tickets.
And flying in the 25-strong alternative circus troupe.
That's true.
Which is amazing. But
no, that was the year that we actually managed to break even.
But
the
I did look at
following
that
year,
and go, that's an expensive expensive. That's an expensive add-on.
Yeah. No, we didn't fly them. They paid themselves. We paid for the dome to come over.
Anyway.
But
so
all
you were
that-
getting to 2004, you lost a considerable amount of money, yourself and your partner, and...
Yeah, and not only did we just lose money, but my partner and I were splitting up, so it was one of those really shitty times.
It all
And
comes
actually,
at once.
my ex-partner, Al Green, who is now a really good mate of mine, but, it was, and we had put Splore on for 3 years together, along with Morgan, until a certain time, so it was messy, and... So someone approached me and told me to go and have a chat to John Minty, that maybe he was interested in having a chat with you. And the fortunate thing is John had come to not just that Splore, but I think he'd come to the one before, and he could, John's always been cruising in the background, checking stuff out, and
Quick aside, I've met Al a couple of times, once at a 40th and elsewhere. Lovely man.
Yes.
We connected
Totally
straight
lovely
away.
man.
Yeah, I love quirky people.
Oh, he's
big
a very
time.
quirky man and an awesome human being. And, we had a lot of good times putting Splore on together as well.
And, just some other questions around that and sort of, I've thought about other things of as I say, the planning side really fascinates me, and the thinking about what are we going to do to kind of have this at a vibe we want it to have it at, and still have it commercially viable. You know what I'm meaning, that fine line in the middle. I'm sure you know it 1,000 times more than I. Weirdly particular question, but is something like instituting the dress-up tradition part of that? Not just making it a kind of free-for-all of people turning up? Do little things like that important?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess one of the things that was...
People come over the hill.
What was different about Splore from 2002 onwards is that it wasn't all about the music, and it never was always about the music. It was always about community and the music, and what could happen when the community in that sort of
and
environment.
the installations and the performers.
So that's when 2002 we've had our first lot of installations. We had some serious sort of performance going on, and it was all the other content that really started to cement Splore as something that wasn't just some sort of outdoor dance party or festival. And the dress up side of things really didn't start happening until 2008. And that was a particularly interesting year where we introduced what's now known as the Living Lounge, and we had the extraordinary international burlesque performers, and we had comedy, and we had
spoken word stuff. And
it was amazing. But to enter the special Saturday night, you had to dress up, and the theme, and that was and you couldn't actually get in to see the show unless you were dressed up, and that was really making people take that extra effort, really pushing people to just go beyond the norm
and really engage and be a
really
part of this
engage
thing
and
that is this thing.
Yeah, that's right. And so that was the big tipping point with the beginning of starting to get people to dress up. I mean, what I love about what Splore has done since I left in 2014 is, I think the tagline that it is New Zealand's biggest dress-up party is the perfect thing, and now people spend months getting ready to dress up for
I think
Splore.
they used to say that about the rugby sevens in Wellington.
Possibly they would have, but I think...
Quite different events.
Yeah, and, the magic of Splore is everything that is created with intent and inclusiveness, and it's all the parts that make it special.
And inclusiveness means, sorry, I cut you off a little there. Inclusiveness means so many things, because I was thinking even just general festival, just the general, what a festival is changed so much since the 90s. So inclusiveness now to me is also about, people being there with their toddlers and their whatevers, and people not feeling like, there's something there for everyone, and it kind of it runs at that pace, doesn't it? So that it doesn't kind of go 200% the whole time. It has its ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine all that's quite an interesting thing to learn about by trial and error in programming too. When do we bring it down for a while? When do we make this bit kick off? When do we...
Yeah, no, it is. There's a real art to that.
Yeah.
Knowing how to...
You'd learn a whole lot about a whole lot of things. Human psychology,
Most definitely.
Crowds.
Definitely. And I think another really important... area that we started to market with Splore from 2006 was making it family friendly, and that really was another a key a real key cog in the wheel to the audiences that we started to attract as well.
Quite differentiates from a lot of the festivals out there in New Zealand, man.
It does, and it just means that having children there is a real leveller. And now parents either bring their kids and they share the duties together with other parents, or they leave them at home and have a good time. It's either or, and but now it's just such I can't imagine a Splore without kids anymore, because it just creates such a beautiful vibe and energy. And
it reminds me of like a very mini moment version of that. In years ago, like I was fifth form, 1991. There's this legendarily like out of control AC/DC show in Wellington, and there's a number of things. I find it really kind of fascinating, as I say, because I find events quite fascinating. It was basically like people in general hadn't really learned about crowd control. The event got delayed because of the wind in New Zealand. They couldn't get their big stage set up. So all these people stuck around town. A lot of them hadn't booked accommodation and they just drunk beer in bars. No water provided, blah, blah, blah. Just there's some quite extraordinary footage of it online.
I can imagine.
But, funnily enough, that was at Athletic Park, which was a really iconic outdoor venue. And then the council just went, nah, there's no more shows ever happening at Athletic Park. And then it changed. They had one more, and it was Dire Straits. And the only reason they let it happen is they said, we'll let you promoters do this if every ticket gets someone in under 15 for free.
Nice. Yeah, lovely.
See what I mean? So they filled it up.
Yes.
They filled it up, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like adults and children together is a different,
it's
different vibration.
It's definitely totally good thing to happen.
And then I know you didn't really book the music, but I also know, of course, you'd be very privy to a lot of this. I was interested in, I'd imagine there's been discussions about what we speak of wanting to broaden the market but not change the market for the worse. There must have been artists that you've talked about that have sat on the borderline of shall we book them or shall we not book them? Yeah,
and John and I definitely had, but more so when John came aboard and John introduced some pretty key international hip-hop acts.
Yeah.
And I think the whole hip-hop element that got brought into Splore was disliked by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
so you also get closed-mindedness on the other side as well.
Really, really exciting for a lot of people. I guess there was some slightly controversial acts, but really, I think the interesting one. I guess one of the most interesting acts that we booked.
I love the Cuban Brothers every year, by the way. It's just a complete aside.
No, I love the Cuban Brothers as well. I mean,
I'd love to have him on here. No, people don't know he's got the thickest Kiwi accent and he's from Palmerston North.
Well, you could probably arrange a Skype thing with Mike. That sort of thing.
I'm going to go through you. So the artist an interesting artist.
So an artist that actually was kind of was Erykah Badu.
I was going to ask about her anyway.
Actually, she was the most difficult artist we'd ever had.
Totally different to the ethos in terms of her approach to how she deals with everyone and
she
prima donna late.
Very prima donna, downright rude actually. And, she sold Splore out. Yeah. Everyone wanted to see Erykah Badu. Yeah. And I thought she was going to attract a really... I knew she was going to attract a big audience, but I didn't realise that she was actually going to attract kind of there was a percentage of the crowd that were quite young and bogan.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting.
Yeah.
I hated that Splore. That was my one Splore I disliked.
Look,
oh my God, nothing more could go wrong. She wouldn't come to the pulpiri.
Really?
Yeah. And
normally, especially like a lot of African American artists really dig that part of...
she didn't leave until we
a
had the
pigeonhole
right
based
side
on race, but-
SUV to bring her out to the event. And
Yeah.
anyhow, it was an interesting experience. I'm not going to bitch about her because she's obviously an incredible musician and
I
an
think
amazing, amazing.
I think it's great you've talked about it and diplomatically, and it confirms a number of things I'd sort of figured based on watching what unfolded. I was there that year.
Yeah, no, it's a really tough year,
Yeah.
and it was tough because we'd sold out, and it was only that we'd maybe had another 1,000 people more than the year before. But what we didn't realise is on that site, 1,000 people is a lot of people.
You had 1,000 extra.
It's 8 from the year before.
Yeah.
And 1,000 people doesn't sound like a lot of people,
When you've got
right?
portaloos, when you've got roads, when you've got staff on gates, when you've got infrastructure's getting pushed.
It was really interesting
Yeah.
and quite, it was very stressful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we had things like the bloody yachties.
Oh, my
God.
God.
I mean, it just couldn't...
He or she is almost worse than Erica Badu.
No, they were way worse. That was the worst.
So we're talking like sort of in story, a number of listeners will know, but my understanding is that some a-hole person who had one of the yacht moorings just emptied their sewage and took off. I know this is like gossipy stuff. Did you ever get any intel on who it might have been?
No, we didn't.
What I do hope is that they know that they did it. They were made aware of the impact and that they do feel bad about it, but then they would have approached you.
You know what was so horrible about it is obviously how it affected
the pool on the beach, so I couldn't go swimming?
No, that aside. But what was really interesting is that we as the organisers were blamed for it for a number of years afterwards. It's like it was our fault that happened because we didn't have enough portaloos or because something like that.
It's not portaloo, it was on a yacht.
But it was just, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
it was just like they, when there's something bad that happens at a festival, punters, no matter what, will always look to find someone to blame.
The audience took that out on you guys.
Yeah, no, a lot of people were really just really rude to us about that and held on to it. But it's this is one of the hardest things about doing a festival and then doing a festival successfully, where people in their minds they do these calculations. Okay, that's that many tickets at that price. Shit, they must be making a lot of money. No. It's very tough sometimes, and people can be very critical. And, I'm quite a sensitive human being, and I often would take it all so personally.
Yeah, don't read the comments.
Comments. It was better I didn't a lot of the time.
Fucking comments.
But it is, and you
stop commenting. Do something.
You talked about before about the commercial reality and that fine balance, and I have to say that is one of the hardest things. It's like you want to keep it underground and a little bit special and magic and whatever, and you've got to actually make it commercially viable, or else it wouldn't exist. And I hugely salute John for taking it on and continue to take it. Every year he does it. He takes the risk himself.
So people can read more about because what happened in 2012. There's a couple of articles with you and stuff. But really, if we take, there was the torrential downpour on Friday. There was the extra 1,000 people. There was Erica Badu being Erica Badu.
Yep.
Then we go to Sunday or whenever it was that the boat leak. So you come out of that, and I sort of want there's two sides of things. Like, how do you reconcile that? Like, you just like, fuck it, I'm over this.
Yeah.
But then you don't do that. So what changes to make you kind of like go, I can move forward with this?
Yeah. You're right. I was over it. But I also knew that I was determined to do it better.
Yeah.
And that's actually what motivated me to keep going. It's like because I knew also at that time that my time with Splore was not too far off coming to an end. And I just wanted to make sure that however I finished Splore, that I went out on a high, that I stopped, and I did it really well. And that I had ticked all the boxes that I personally wanted to tick, but also what I wanted to do for the festival.
Stubborn for the good.
Stubborn for the good. So I knew that I had definitely one more in me, and also that was also the time that we really introduced the very strong sustainability program into the festival with the reusable cups, the parking fees, all those sorts of things that we were introducing at that time in 2014. And the theme that was around love, it was like, we've just got to change, because the vibe didn't feel... Lots of people loved the Yurika Badu Festival, but I
had a good time at that festival.
And lots of people did, and that's all good.
But I could tell that
I was just like, actually, this is not what I want Sport to be, and it's got to change. And we've learned a lot of lessons on logistics and operations, so let's make the last one, well, let's make the next one the absolute best I can. And we did a lot of really cool things on that Explore, and it was a beautiful energy and a beautiful vibe. It was a full moon. It was a lot less people, and that was interesting as well.
Did you purposely cap the tickets this time around?
No. We unfortunately, well, I mean, in many ways, I think it was fortunate, but actually, it was one of those. Eminem booked for the Saturday of Explore. And while they're slightly different audiences...
There is still some crossover.
No, we would have lost probably 400 people.
Because for some people, he's a holy grail artist that they want to see.
I had friends that went to that.
I'd totally go and see him.
Totally. Absolutely get it. But it came, well after we had booked our dates and were underway with planning. And while, let's just say, he took 400 people from the Explore audience, that's kind of that's
once you get to your bottom line, everything above, I
mean, it's actually a little bit of
that's
extra
the small
money.
amount of tickets that the people you talked about before, they think you're rolling around in Scrooge and your coins, but it's actually those final tickets.
For 47,000 at the Western
Totally.
Springs is nothing,
but
400 people for Explore was a fucking lot of people.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But the energy and the mood at that one was just extraordinary. It was I loved it.
I was there. That was at that one too. I haven't been to every one, but I was at that one too, for sure.
It was a really just chilled, nice, easy. I can't even remember what acts we had.
I was going to say, can you remind me? I can't remember. Was it did you say 2014? No,
I'm sure we had some
good vintage. That one,
good vintage.
It was a good vintage.
And then that was and I've been working towards discussions with John about how I was getting ready to depart. And
so it's still biannual then, eh? So you that's great that you went from to that one as one of the ones that's that I'll cherish out of all the great moments I've had at all of them. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, totally.
Then you did another one after that, didn't you? 2016? No, that was the last one.
No.
Do you enjoy going back as a punter?
So no, then from 15. Yeah. So 15 was the first annual. It's been annual ever since.
But you finished in 14.
That was my last.
Do you go back?
Oh
every year?
I go back and I just got booked for the lineup this year.
Fantastic! What are you going to play? You got to play Goa Trance.
You
got to play it on 2 Sony cassette decks.
I should. I absolutely should. If I could find a Sony cassette.
What sort of music do you play now? I mean, it's a sort of question I can't really answer. I play bits and bobs of everything.
Yeah,
but are you better question. Are you booked for like a pumping middle of the night set, or are you doing an afternoon thing? Or
so the last 3 years I've been playing at the Lucky Star Zone at sort of peak time, sort of midnight 10 till midnight till 2. I play lots of... I play everything. My sets are disco to techno.
Great.
Okay, so I play a lot of funk and disco. I play a lot of... a bit of house, a bit of tech house. But, for me, my music is... because I love dancing. And
you're doing Morning People, I see, as well.
I have done Morning People.
Enjoyable?
I did.
My mother's like, what? My mother goes to the gym, the one next to
Morning People here in Auckland
clubbing all night.
great.
And I'm like, no, they get up and go to it. It's very different to...
I did do a Morning People in Wellington. Well, in Wellington, Morning People did not take off like Auckland Morning People.
Okay.
And when I did it...
Wellington are not morning people. I'm from Wellington. That's probably it.
Exactly it. I did Morning People here in Auckland, and I loved it. And so I've also just been booked for Rhythm and Alps and the Wahine Toa Night.
Through Elmo?
Yeah, through Elmo.
I hadn't had a name for myself for years, nor was I pursuing DJing like that. I found a daytime life. And it's actually where I met Elle is at Elmo's 40th that I got
nice.
invited to via a friend.
Yes.
The long story short is my friend says, bring your Serato box along. And I'm not going to a thing at the Rhythm and Vine site and playing with all these people who are, like I'm sort of out of that loop. But there was sort of 2 or 3 people with music. I played. Elmo and I hit it off.
Yeah.
He books me for Rhythm and Alps to go down there and do some crewing as well to make it worth my while. This story actually gets fantastic. So I go, okay, well, I'm no one to anyone on that bill. My name's on the thing, whatever, and I'll probably play at like 1 p.m. on one of the...
Yep.
He books me on... There's 2 stages. He books me on New Year's Eve, midnight till 1:30, with DJ Zinc on the other stage.
Brilliant.
And I end up with like 3,000 people and trees around me, a crowd with a horizon. It was fucking amazing.
Oh, that is so cool.
And we never really followed up a lot because I really dig the guy. But I just see him every now and again since his 40th.
Yeah.
But it was just like, wow. I love how he does those things on a whim because it's his party.
No,
you know?
he's a really good guy. I mean, I got to know him because before he started doing Rhythm
and
Out,
I didn't freak out, may I add. I owned it.
It's fantastic.
Because you think, when you're not doing it all the time,
Yeah.
that's a big call. But I actually was like, okay, I've got this.
No, so I'm playing with a whole group. It's all women playing in the log cabin.
Great. The world's smallest nightclub, the minuscule of sound.
The minuscule of sound.
And this is a sort of a stock question, but I think it's really worth asking. And like there'll be way more than you remember now. You mentioned a couple, but what are some of your like this is all worth it moments you remember from Splore over the years?
Yeah. Yes, there has been a few. As I said,
3 out, that'll be fine.
Yeah, no, so definitely Fat Freddy's 2002,
Great.
G Desert Dome.
Yeah.
I think some of my most... Orbital, 2
Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
was that? 3 years
Yeah.
ago? Epic, more epic than I could have possibly imagined. I loved the stage because they were some of my favourites from the 2000s.
And you always wonder what those, I guess that you kind of call them heritage acts are going to do
Oh my God!
all that time later.
They did way better than I ever thought. So that was incredible. I think some of my other favourites have actually been the Sunday afternoons on main stage. So I think Mr. Scruff's Sunday afternoon was
I've got a copy of that. Someone gave me that. I wasn't there. He's one of my favourite kind of DJs, and I've somehow got 4 hours of that set on the computer, and it's nowhere near, I imagine, like being there.
Oh no, it was superb, and I think those have been magic moments. I think Butterfly Zoo in 2008 was just extraordinary, and. Yeah, oh, God.
No, that's good. I think we've done remarkably well. It's really been really engaging, and
have we knocked it out in 40 minutes?
This is an hour and 10.
Oh, really?
I told you it was like. So is this the most you've talked? Did you talk to me more about Splore than you did Kim?
Kim was 10 minutes.
Okay.
And I didn't let her ask too many questions. I just spoke for 10 minutes, so she couldn't.
She probably didn't know what Goa Chance was like I do.
No.